All right, so just got done talking about, excuse me, on the previous video about how all epithelial tissue is avascular. And remember that epithelial tissue is going to form membranes, form glands, line passages. So it does a lot of things. It's also the outside layer of our skin. So how do we classify and how is it built? So this video is going to focus on what you see there, cell shapes and layers of epithelial tissue, and we'll also talk a little bit about glandular epithelial. As you're going through these videos, you have a packet that has pictures on it of each of these things. You can use those pictures to fill out your notes as we go. Okay, so cell shapes and layers says the epithelial tissue is classified by the cells that make it up and then the layers of those cells. And this will be very important as we go through all of the different types of epithelial tissue. So we have some shapes, okay, some kind of some funny words coming through here. So first we have squamous cells. Sometimes you'll hear people say squamous cells. These are the flat cells. People say they kind of look like scales on a snake, or I've heard people say they look like floor tiles, right? These really flat cells. Cuboidal cells, probably pretty easy to figure that one out. It looks like they look like cubes, okay, pretty much the same height as they are thickness. Then you have columnar cells, again, pretty easy to figure out. They're a little bit taller than they are wider, so they kind of look like columns. All right, they say you see there it says they appear narrow and cylindrical. Now we take these three types of cells and we layer them. So based on how they're layered, that'll give us the names of the tissue that we're looking at. So first we have simple. If there's just one layer of cells, it's called simple. So for example, simple squamous would be one layer of squamous shaped cells. Stratified is going to be two or more layers. Again, if I have stratified squamous, that's going to be multiple layers of flattened cells. Okay, and again, you're going to see this as we go through the types of epithelial tissue. Then we have this word pseudo-stratified. Let me move my video here. Pseudo-stratified. Pseudo, if you've ever heard the term pseudonym, that's a fake name, like authors would write under a pseudonym. So pseudo-stratified, it looks like it's layered, but it's actually just one layer. That has to do with where the level of the nuclei or each nucleus is in a cell. It makes it look like there's a bunch of different layers. Then we have a fourth one, excuse me. It's called transitional. Transitional, we're going to see like in our urinary bladder, this is a type that would change thickness. So sometimes it looks really flat, sometimes it looks really thick, and that has to do with how those tissues might stretch during their jobs. So we'll see that with our urinary bladder and urethra and ureters. So we'll talk about that a little bit later as we go through the layers or the different types of epithelial tissue. So a couple pictures here. So we have squamous or squamous, cuboidal, and columnar, and you can see the shapes and how they're different. This would be a simple, because there's just one layer, and then stratified. And you see some of those other terms coming back up. You have the apical surface, the surface that's facing the lumen, the open area of a cavity or a tube, the basal surface, which is attached to the basement membrane. So in this picture, this pink spot would be the basement membrane. And then you can see how these cells fit together. I like this part down here. It says the basal cells regenerate. This is where, like, if I have a stratified epithelium, bunch of layers, mitosis is happening down on this spot down here at the bottom, and then pushing all the cells up. And we'll see that, like with the layers of our skin. We'll talk pretty deeply about that when we get to the integumentary system. So here's all the different types that we're going to be studying. I'm moving myself way out of the screen now, but simple squamous, simple cuboidal. This black thing would get out of the way. There we go. Simple columnar. Then we go to stratified squamous. That's multiple layers of squamous cells, although that's going to be a little different. We'll see that in a little bit. Stratified cuboidal, pseudo-stratified, and you'll notice that pseudo-stratified, the nuclei are in different levels, so it looks like there's more than one level, but there's actually just one layer cell. And then stratified columnar epithelium, which would be multiple layers of columnar cells. All right, so Glandular epithelium. So glands of our body produce hormones and secrete products for our body. So a lot of times it's going to be made, well, all the times it's going to be made or partly made of epithelial tissue. So we classify these glands in a couple of different ways. So first of all, they secrete products. They produce products, hormones. But you can think of like a sweat gland produces sweat. Sebaceous gland, excuse me, would produce oil on our skin. So it's not always just hormones. Says they can be unicellular or multicellular. Unicellular gland would be a goblet cell, and we'll talk more about that. A goblet cell secretes mucus, like in our digestive tract. You'll see, or respiratory tract. These goblet cells are secreting a bunch of mucus to trap dust and stuff. See there within cuboidal or columnar epithelium, we have two main groups, of glandular epithelium. Exocrine are the type that are going to have ducts. Okay, a duct is like a tube that's going to connect it to something else. So I would have a gland and then a tube that takes the stuff from that gland to its destination. Okay, you can see there it says it might take it to surfaces like the skin or the lining of the digestive tract. So that's exocrine. Endocrine are ductless. They do not have a duct. All right. So whatever they produce, it kind of just goes straight to a tissue straight to a tissue or to their destination, or to the blood or intestinal fluid. So exocrine versus endocrine. And then I can take exocrine and really divide it down even more. Okay. You can divide it by the shape of the duct. Okay. So let me pull up all these. Tubular would be basically a tube-like duct, and then alveolar, and you may even see a word acinar, ACINAR, that excuse me, that is the same thing as alveolar. Okay, so sac-like ducts. I'm going to show you some pictures here in a minute, so don't be too concerned right now. They could also be classified by the number of ducts. So simple, we got that word again. That's when it has one duct. And then compound, two or more ducts. Okay, so this is confusing. This is a very confusing part of glandular epithelium. So let me go back again. Remember, exocrine are going to have ducts. Okay, endocrine, no duct. Again, I'm going to show you pictures in a second. Tubular ducts. For exocrine glands, they can have tubular or alveolar ducts. Okay, and then the number of ducts, simple versus compound. So what does this mean? My guy moved me again. So here we go, an exocrine gland. You see that this portion down here is where they'd be secreting their products, this yellow part. But then it has a duct right here that takes it somewhere, okay? Takes it to the surface of a tissue, or takes it to the surface of the skin, okay? Over here, endocrine glands, you see that there's really no differentiation between the duct and the part that is doing the secretion of products. So it kind of just looks like a couple cells, right? Well, that's basically what it is. And then, so for instance, this yellow part would secrete its products directly into a capillary, which is carrying blood, and then the products would be carried by the blood. Then I have my different types or classifications. So I can look at the ducts and the shape of them. Okay. So here I have simple tubular, right? Simple one duct, and it's kind of this tube shaped. Then I have a lot of other classifications like coiled and branched. I'm not worried about you knowing that so much for this class. Okay. But understand that simple meaning one, compound meaning many ducts leading to the surface. Okay. Then tubular, see, they kind of look like a tube, a little bit longer, versus alveolar, kind of this sac-like classification. This would be alveolar here. Okay. And then compound versus simple, I've already talked about. So we'll take look at a lot of examples with those as we go through this unit, and as we study more of glandular epithelium. This is a hard topic, I think. It's just kind of hard to, I guess, wrap your brain around. But again, it's just like our past unit when we did like the membrane and the cavity that it's in. If you think of the words that are making it up, simple or compound, tubular versus alveolar, it's a good way to try to remember what those glands are going to look like.